Fresh from the showcase here at SwissWatchExpo, I'm Blake here with Creed talking about our collection of Perpetual Calendars, perhaps one of the greatest complications in the history of watchmaking. This here is the ultimate set it and forget it complication. You keep these things wound, you'll never have to worry about whether the information being displayed on them is right or wrong, and you'll never have to change them. These are some really remarkable pieces, and we do have a few specific examples that we really wanted to show you guys that we have to offer right now.
Yeah, starting with the Patek Philippe, the very first sort of perpetual calendar in the industry, the one that really brought it to everybody. This watch was the first sort of wrist watch that people wore with the perpetual calendar, the most complicated. One of the things that you should know about the Patek Philippe, specifically this particular perpetual calendar, is that this is a 1987 model, and that's important because in 1986 the Model 89 was introduced, and the Model 89 was patented in one of the very most complicated wristwatches ever developed, and it still remains that way. So this is just 1 year later with the perpetual calendar. It's kind of interesting. There was all kinds of things about the 89. You can go read up about it. It included a minute repeater and all kinds of things.
Oh, wow.
Which a minute repeater, for those folks who don't know, is something that it has a hammer and a chime. So at certain points and intervals, depending on what the designer does, it will ring. Right. And it'll chime on certain hours, much like a grandfather clock, for those of people who may know what a grandfather clock is. I mean, we're getting so far into history now that people don't remember what watchmaking and clockmaking were at this point.
Right.
We have a lot of examples here at SwissWatchExpo, and here's the thing. We don't have a lot of time, and we don't want to take a lot of your time to show you the intricacies of how a perpetual calendar works, what all the mechanical things are, because it is complicated. What you should know is that the perpetual calendar is is the single most complicated movement style, as you said, and requires a whole lot of expertise because they are good until the year 2100. Now, some companies like Vacheron are good until for the next 150 years, starting from the date that they're made, which is a really interesting thing because they continually evolve. Why does that matter? Because mathematicians have to actually figure out, remember, this is a mechanical watch. This actually understands the calendar for the next 100 years to 150 years. In these particular cases, some of the manufacturers opt to only move them through the year 2100. Now, why does that matter? Well, all of the math has been done in order to make sure that the gear sets move in just such a way that they account for all kinds of things, including a leap year, which is why we're doing the perpetual calendar this year. There is a difference between an annual calendar and a perpetual calendar. An annual calendar only calculates every single month with the exception of a leap year. It will not jump forward when you have a leap year. It also doesn't understand February. February is a complicated month because in the Gregorian calendar, which is an evolved calendar that we use today most commonly, every 4 years it cycles and jumps. Well, February 28th is a specifically strange time of the year because the calendars just don't know how to equate that. So you have to that would be the only time on an annual calendar you have to move it forward manually. On a perpetual calendar, it knows those. So you don't have to touch it, as you said, set it and forget it. Now here's the thing. This is where it gets really intense. Some manufacturers on perpetual calendars, they don't make the watch in a way where if you happen to go a little bit past the year, you have to let the watch wind down and die and let the calendar catch up. If you happen to get too far advanced, you've got to send that watch back to the manufacturer and be completely reset. That can be an expensive proposition, particularly with companies like Vacheron or Patek Philippe, or some of the other ones, okay? Now, JLC gives you a little bit more influential perpetual calendar, and by that what I mean is it's a little bit more simplistic to have worked on. It's actually a nice thing. JLC's done a really good job of that. Other companies like IWC offer a perpetual calendar as well, but the reason I mention these watches is because these are thicker. Not all perpetual calendars are made exactly the same. If you look at the thickness on this JLC versus this Patek Philippe, so in my right hand I have the Patek Philippe in the solid gold, and I've got the JLC in my left hand. Significant difference in the way that the thicknesses are. That's because the movement is more complicated in the Patek Philippe because it's smaller.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to make all these gear sets and gear trains work in a perpetual calendar. Now, a little bit of sort of history on this. In the 1920s, the reason that perpetual calendars and complication sets got really popular is because there was Mr. Henry Graves, which was a banker, he was one of the richest people in the United States at the time. And you may have heard of Packard, of the Packard Automobile Company. Okay, these were two guys who really competed head to head. Interestingly enough, they never actually met each other and hung out together.
Weird.
But it was known in the watch world that these two people were conspiring to build the most complicated and the most fancy watch, because during the 1920s in the United States, this was a time when people really wanted to show off their collection. Watch collections were absolutely enormous. It was the one thing that set others apart from each other. You know, if you were a millionaire and you had the most complicated watch, these are the things that you did.
Right.
So Henry Graves was really important in the watch world, because when he set out to have Patek build him a watch, he had a minute repeater, he had a perpetual calendar, and these were the most expensive watches at the time. And that's important because the Frank Mueller, everybody wants to know, why is the Frank Mueller called the master banker? Well, it's because the tonneau shape from Henry Graves was the shape that he wore. Patek Philippe had the tonneau shape, the minute repeater. His watch just last year at Sotheby's sold for $4.75 million. Ooh. Yeah, really intense. So that's why the Frank Mueller, in a perpetual calendar form, in a tonneau shape, is called the master banker. But more importantly, this is most like the original Patek Philippe that Henry Graves wore.
Yeah. And something I didn't know about these perpetual calendars until I started doing research, which makes sense now considering how exclusive they used to be, that none of these complications were basically available to the public until like the late 60s. Right. All of this early generation from the 20s onward, every single one of these pieces were specifically commissioned for one collector. That's right. So I can't even imagine what the currency translation is to modern times, right. But astronomically expensive and a very exclusive complication to have.
The first commercially available watch from Patek Philippe was 1929.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but imagine, you had to be really a high-end watch buyer. Mm-hmm. This was not like for just anybody. This was, for the Biltmores and the Vanderbilts and, these people, the Firestones, the Goodyears, these people are the buyers of these watches.
People too busy to set their watches. It has to always tell.
Right, absolutely. So I think it's important to note that in Breitling, we actually have a really great Transocean model. These were extraordinarily rare. And with me being an obvious Breitling guy, a captain for Breitling for many years, and which means that I sold these new at an AD, and I had to go through a lot of training in order to obtain that. It's a high mark of honor for sales folks. Not everybody does it. And what you start learning is just exactly what it is that Breitling shines in. For the type of money that you pay for this Transocean, it is not only a moon phase, but it's also a perpetual calendar. It's a great size watch. It's gorgeous. I mean, you could some people have certain feelings about the Milanese bracelet. I just think this is one of the single most classic looking watches really in the watch industry. They no longer make this. And for the price that you're going to pay for it here at Swiss Watch Expo, it's $5,490. This watch was close to $12,000 new. So, wow. Yeah. You can get some really great deals on perpetual calendars here. We even have a digital model, the Omega Constellation perpetual calendar. This is interesting because this is a digital watch. It's got a little computer inside that knows they cheat. So that's why all digital watches know perpetual calendar, right? They're programmed to know that. It's the complication set of the mechanics, the very slight movements of the wheels inside. It's how fast the watch has to move and keep up time. Really, it's a mechanical genius that you can do this. The very most expensive watch, if I'm remembering correctly, it's the 57-260 from Vacheron, 2 pounds of gold. It's a pocket watch. It's absolutely enormous. The most expensive watch in the world not only knows the I believe you call it the Hebraic calendar, the Hebrew calendar, the Jewish calendar, which is extraordinarily complicated, by the way. And it also has the Gregorian calendar in it. And those complication sets, all in one watch, the most complicated watch commissioned by an unknown investor. There's only one of them. Kind of as a throwback to the 20s. Nobody knows who this individual is the most complicated watch ever created, and it was done by Vacheron, which is, everybody knows, is one of my favorite companies. So, perpetual calendars, we could go on and on. We won't, but you can call us and talk to us about the ones that you love, the one that you want to purchase here at Swiss Watch Expo. We've got a bunch of these perpetual calendars, and you should definitely have one in your collection if you don't already.
Absolutely.